本期视频是中国学者金刻羽4月18日在美国明尼阿波利斯威斯特敏斯特市政厅发表演讲后的问答环节第一部分。面对主持人的一系列犀利提问，金刻羽表达了自己对中国经济、香港经济长期向好的坚定信心，并阐述了自己对人民币国际化、一带一路和中国在世界的角色定位的观点和看法。我们看看他是怎么说的吧。
So you started to allude to this a little bit in your remarks, but the book came out last year. A lot has happened in the last year in the world and in the Chinese economy in particular. We have a real estate sort of crisis, I think it's fair to say, in China that's been happening. There's been a lot of questions about the slowdown in growth, and there have been some numbers that came out this week that suggest that some of that maybe is coming back. But I guess maybe just a way to frame this is, if you were to write one more chapter of the book today, reflecting on sort of what's been happening over the last year or so since the book came out, what would you say about the model and how it is holding up now, and maybe how it has to change going forward?
Thank you, Tane, and that's a really excellent question, really important question. The model is being tested. In my book, I really argue that state coordination, state mobilization was really important for a certain stage of development. China has reached the stage of development where there needs to be a lot more markets and a lot less state. And so that has to change, but there's some signs that things are changing over time. But, we also have to wonder, as I alluded to this as well, the ups and downs are part of the features of, economic cycles. And one big difference is that this country had something like a $5 trillion stimulus package over the pandemic. Chinese households had nothing. And there is, a serious loss of confidence and also loss of opportunities. So it's going to take time for the economy to recover. And by the way, China's already massive. It's already big. So to keep on growing that fast is going to be very difficult. India, everybody talks about India, and India is definitely an exciting place. But even if India grows, let's say 4 to 5 percentage points faster than China until 2030, China's still going to contribute $130 trillion more of GDP to the world than India. So it has to slow down anyways. But look, I think a broader question is, can we have more expertise in the system? Can the people's preferences be reflected more in the leadership's decisions? That all requires a huge amount of reforms. What I'm worried about most is when countries get to a certain income level and they drop the pro-growth agenda. And that would be really, really sad for China and for the rest of the world too.
There's a question here about China potentially trying a strategy to take the place or at least compete with the U.S. as the world's monetary exchange. And this could probably get very technical, but I'm wondering if you can help kind of orient us around what that space is in that conversation.
China has, among its other ambitions or aspirations, wants to internationalize the RMB. Dollar is very powerful. Dollar is very, very dominant. And so I think it has the plans, but realistically, it is still very, very far from coming close to that goal of being even really an international currency. Why? Very, very simply and very briefly, you need a financial system like the US. Breadth, liquidity, size. Just look at the US treasuries. It's not just trade denominated in dollars, but the lending is also denominated in dollars. And it's very, very hard to replace that. But that said, again, we cannot forget the other part of the world, the massive emerging developing world. They have a desire for a parallel movement of maybe a common currency, maybe an alternative to dollar, albeit being very difficult. That is a desire in the financial system, but it's also very difficult to achieve.
There's a couple of different questions about Hong Kong and about Hong Kong's ability to self-determine, but also at least one about Hong Kong as a global financial center and whether that changes as it is sort of, it's in a different world now where it's become part of mainland China in this way. So I'm wondering if you can talk about both of those, both sort of the relationship that we've seen over the last years with China and Hong Kong, and then also the financial sort of center implications of that.
The fate of Hong Kong and mainland China are inextricably linked. If Hong Kong does well, it makes China look good. And if China's economy does well, it would be good for Hong Kong's economy because Hong Kong is the financial center, the conduit through which a lot of the capital investment flows. And so I recently went to Hong Kong last week, 2 weeks ago, and they were still pretty optimistic because even though a lot of people left, some new people are coming back and they're reinventing themselves. I'm not an expert on Hong Kong, but I do just want to mention one thing. And in the spirit of just giving you another side of the story, because we're all familiar with one side of the story, the Hong Kong people told me that in 2003, SARS arrived in Hong Kong. And the Hong Kong economy was completely, going under. At that time, Hong Kong asked mainland China, can you lift the restrictions so that you can help us with our economy? They actually took the initiative so that there could be more economic integration between the two countries. Many of you have been to Hong Kong. Most people from most countries will never need a visa to go to Hong Kong. Guess who needs a visa? Chinese. Mainland Chinese need to go get a visa. And just in the spirit of a broader audience, the cultural aspects. They put up 2 beautiful museums. And geez, the artists, politically opposite to the Chinese government, are all hanging there. I was very, very surprised. So I think the complexity of the issue is not something I have the expertise or the time to talk about, but anyways, they are kind of really linked together, and I still believe the Hong Kong people have some hope that they'll be able to kind of reinvigorate their economy and their livelihoods.
There's a question here that ties together two. So you talked about the younger generation, and this person is wondering what this younger generation thinks of the Belt and Road initiatives, and that will probably require a little bit of explanation as to the Belt and Road initiatives.
Thank you. China also had a vision, or you can say the leadership had a vision in China of building infrastructure around the world. And as we mentioned, emerging markets need infrastructure. There's a $1 trillion infrastructure gap every year in the world. And I just came from the World Bank. They were talking about we need infrastructure investment. So China came up with this Belt and Road initiative. China wanted to put in money. They wanted to send construction workers. They wanted to do these development projects. That was a good idea in design. It was probably not well implemented, huge amount of problems, emerging market debt. But there's also a lot of misunderstanding, and that is also changing. By the way, just one statistic, 90% of the developing countries' debt is held by Western financial institutions. And that's just the data. It's not really just the Chinese infrastructure that has kind of cast them into debt. So I have issues. I have issues with the plan and implementation, but it was an idea. I don't know what the younger generation thinks about it. The younger generation, obviously uber connected, they think about innovation. They don't think about hard power as much. That's the older generation, the infrastructure, the money, and all this hard politics. They think about softer links and softer power, and that's also why I'm more hopeful for them.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that there is a growing skepticism or in certain parts, in certain sectors of this country, in the United States, of going out into the globe and trying to set terms for other countries, right? And we have a long history of doing that, but you hear a lot more of people saying, is that really our role? And I guess maybe that's part of the question. Do you hear those kinds of debates right now in China about what is our role, not just in how we take care of ourselves, but what values do we potentially impose or ask of other countries that we work with?
That is a really, really great question. Thank you, Tane, for that. It reminds me to say that people in China talk about really different issues, and they worry about different issues, partly because they have developing country, have different set of challenges. They want to stay engaged. I think it would be a mistake to think about China as wanting to kind of recede from the globe. They want to be, it's all about openness and sending their kids to school internationally, and if they can, merging the businesses. And by the way, Starbucks everywhere. I said, yes, McDonald's, that was my gift when I did well in school, a Happy Meal. That was luxury, and Estee Lauder. I think American business have or potentially can do really well in China, and they like that. They like to be internationally integrated. Now, just to be serious for a little bit and to be completely honest, I do think that Chinese government feels somewhat of an existential threat of not being able to control their core components like chips or core competencies. And in that sense, they're trying to strive for greater independence. As, by the way, Japan is spending $500 million on indigenous innovation. We haven't talked about the CHIPS Act, Science Act, Inflation Reduction Act. Europe is doing the same. UK is feeling it's falling behind and spending a lot more on compute. So we're getting that kind of a return of more needs to be done. And I'm not sure it's all that bad, because if it does mean lots more cleaner energy and a faster transition, it has to be managed. It's a complex relationship that has to be managed, but it's not inconsistent with globalization. Maybe protection on certain areas, but more open on other areas. These are not irreconcilable paradoxes.